monsters at the door. I put on all my armor, but I couldn't find my sword. There'll always be tomorrow. Just you wait and see. If they come to take you prisoner, I'll be there to set you free.
Graham Russell is a true musical icon. He and his musical partner of 46 years, Russell Hitchcock, formed Air Supply, the songwriting super duo in the early 1970s, and really never looked back. Graham's childhood was anything but normal, leaving him without a mother at a very early age. However, these stark beginnings formed in him a sort of poetry that eventually found its way into the hearts of millions of fans, as Air Supply became a genre unto itself. He is and will always be a passionate man, loving his friends and family, and most especially his fans, with the deepest sense of love and commitment. This is my interview with a sweetheart of a guy, the writer of songs that make men and women fall in love over and over again. Please enjoy this very special podcast with Graham Russell.
Mother said she's sleeping, so I climbed back into bed.
Let me start this way. I think this is a really fascinating thing. And I wanted to say something about this whole opportunity that's really different for me compared to any other interview I've ever had. And that's when I found out I was going to be offered a chance to speak to you, my heart raced because I was going to be talking to this icon in the business. You see, what you don't know, of course, is that obviously, I mean, I've been around quite a while. I'm 54 years old.
Yeah.
And I grew up with a lot of your music. And when you have those sort of young experiences, you know, they're very much a sort of, they bonded with your youth. And I was really worried that I was going to have to come up with something new and unique to say to you, or some question that
Right.
that you had never been asked. And it occurred to me, it's a lot like trying to buy a Christmas present for a grandparent. You know, they already have everything. And
Right.
and since we're limited a bit, what I'd really like to know is more about your origin story. You know, maybe something the fans have rarely heard or have never heard. So can we go back to England and talk about your early days and then just kind of go from there towards where you are now?
Yeah, but well, first of all, I'm very flattered that you feel that way. You know, it's funny because, you know, we've been together for 46 years this year, which is a long time. And I know there are bands like the Stones and a lot of other bands that have been around even longer. But when I sit and think about that, I go, oh my God, you know, that's a long time. So when you say something like that, that you grew up with our music, and a lot of people did, I sort of sit back and I think, oh my, is that me? You know, but we've been around a long time, thankfully. But I'm very flattered that you feel that way. But going back, you know, to where I began, I grew up in England, of course, and I had a very kind of turmoil childhood, you know, and I think that's what steered me into beginning to write songs. You know, when I lost my mother when I was 10 years old, and which was devastating for me. And because I knew she was sick, but I didn't know how badly. You know, she died from cancer.
Oh.
And so that had such an effect on me that I didn't speak to anybody for 3 months. And I went completely inside, and I couldn't speak because her and I were very, very close. I was the only boy. And then suddenly to have her taken away, the effect was just devastating. And so I started to write things down on pieces of paper when I began to come out of my shell. I wouldn't speak to anybody still, but I would write things down on paper. Like, for instance, if somebody asked me how I was, I would write it on a piece of paper and I would say, oh, I'm fine, how are you? But then I started to make it fun. I started to make it rhyme. So I started writing all this verse, and then I really enjoyed it, you know, and I thought, oh, wow, this is really fun. But then when I started to speak to people again, I kept on writing the verse, and that's how I started to write songs. So I was very young. I wrote my first song when I was 11, but I really didn't know what I was doing. You know, this was even pre-Beatles, but when the Beatles came along, everything made sense to me. And I went, oh, okay. Yeah. And I became a Beatle fanatic, as most of the world was at that point, and probably still is. But then everything started to make sense at an early age. Then I taught myself guitar and piano, and then I started to put all my verse together with music, and that's how I started to write songs. But from the very early stages, when I was a young teenager, I always wanted to be in a band and be a rock and roll person. Yeah. And there was never anything else I wanted to do. And I never let go of that. And I remember speaking to my careers teacher at school. She said, well, what do you want to do when you leave school? Hoping I'd say, you know, I'd like to go to university and be a doctor or something like that. But I said, oh, I'd like to be in a band, and I want to play music. And of course, they humor you at that age. Right. But nevertheless, she said, oh, okay, that's all right. But I never let go of that. And so my formidable years growing up were always geared towards being in a band and writing music and being a singer and a guitarist. You know, that's what I always wanted to do.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. You know, something you said right off the bat is you said rock and roll band. Right, yeah. And I know there's a sort of, we'll get to the Air Supply story in a bit, but yeah. I know there's a sort of a thing in the background that says, stop calling us soft rock because we're a rock band.
Yeah, yeah. And we're a rock and roll band, you know. Yes. And for people that haven't seen us, they're really surprised when they do see us live because it's loud and it's a rock and roll band, but we just happen to play a lot of these beautiful epic songs. But at the same time, those big epic moments is all rock and roll, you know. I mean, it's huge and it's loud and it's very powerful live. But that's what I always wanted. I didn't want to be in a little group that's that doesn't have an effect on people, you know. I want it to be in your face, and the show is in your face, and people are very surprised. They go, oh, I had no idea you were like that. And I said, well, you do now, you know.
No, it's very epic. In fact, when you broke here in the States, you know, you had Lost in Love, I believe was the first hit in the States. I could be wrong. But all that being said, I remember very clearly, you do not know this about me, but I was a professional drummer for 25 years. And when I was a child, yeah, so we have a similar story, although my mother didn't pass away, but I started very young too. And there was this period of time in my teens when you guys came to the forefront that I remember driving across one of the mountain passes locally, and one of your songs came on the radio. And my mother said, and I remember this very clearly, she said, you know, I've been thinking about this, and one day I really believe you're either going to play in Chuck Mangione's band or you're going to play with Air Supply. And I said, I mean, you know, I was listening to Kansas and Rush and Styx and all the sort of, you know, progressive rock of the day, because it's difficult drumming, as it were, right? Yeah. And I said, why? And she said, because their music is epic and dramatic.
Oh, wow. What a lovely thing to say.
Isn't that something?
That's quite amazing that you remembered that too. But I mean, if anyone can give us a compliment, that would be it. Because I would like us to be remembered for those kind of descriptive words, you know, being epic and dramatic and theatrical. Because I think we are live. It's very theatrical. But then if you think, you know, where we began, you know, Russell and I met in Superstar, Jesus Christ Superstar.
Makes sense.
And we were in that for almost 2 years. So that was part of our training, because before that, I was playing on my own in folk clubs with my guitar, but I was playing all my own songs, which was difficult. At first they didn't want to hear your own song. They didn't want to hear original songs. But I persevered and I did really well. But then when I went in Superstar, it was a whole new thing. And I learned about the theatre, and I learned how to be a professional artist and an entertainer. That's what it gave me. And that was part of the crash course on learning things in the music industry. You know.
Right. And that was in Australia, correct?
It was, yeah.
How did you end up in Australia? Do you mind sharing a little bit of that sort of story?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, part of my tumultuous childhood after my mother passed away, you know, as I said, I became very insular with everything. And my father remarried after about 2 years, and I wasn't ready for that. And his new wife had 3 kids of her own, and I resented that too. So I became this young teenager that was kind of a rebel, and I had no respect for authority. And, you know, I became a loner, and I just drifted in my own world. And my dad wanted to go to Australia to emigrate. And I said, well, I don't want to go, because I was doing very well at school, and I was quite academic at school. And he said, no, we're going to Australia, but I just wasn't ready. So what I did, I went along with the whole scheme. And the night before we were all leaving for Southampton to get on a boat for 6 weeks, I ran away from home, and I was 13 years old, and I ran away, and and my dad went to Australia, and I never saw him for another 6 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I ran away, and I went to live with an uncle. Then I went to live with another aunt. And so I was on my own. And then my sister decided to go to Australia, and she had an apartment on Russell Road, funnily enough. And it was a nice apartment. And before she left, she said, yeah, we're leaving, and, you know, we're moving out of the apartment. And I was in a band, and I was playing drums too at that point.
Wow.
But I was a terrible drummer. But I was earning decent money. We were in a local band. And I thought, wow, I could take this apartment over. You know, I was, at this point, I was 15 years old. And I was making more money than my sister. So I took the apartment over. So when I was 15, I was in my own apartment, and I had nobody to boss me around. But I learned to grow up really fast. Suddenly I had to go shopping and do my own things, vacuum yeah. And so I grew up, but I was very responsible. I didn't go down the dark path. I became very responsible, and I started to write songs furiously. And that's how it all started for me. And I was in the band. And then when I was ready to go to Australia, in my own time, I decided to go. And I joined my sister and, of course, my dad. And funnily enough, you know, when I got to Australia and all the time I was there, my dad never, ever mentioned the fact that I ran away. He never said, well, what happened? You know, he never mentioned it. And it was like we started again, and we became very close. That's how I started, and that's how I got to Australia.
That's such a great story. I don't know how many people know that, but I've never heard that, and it's not on Wikipedia.
Oh, nobody knows that. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing. I don't want to hit too much on your mother. I know that even 60 years off, you know, ish, that's a tremendously painful topic and will always be so. But I'm curious what you know about your mother. Do you feel that genetically she passed on a set of talents to you, or a determination? Because when you said that you were by yourself and you didn't go down the dark path, you certainly could have, to fulfill the pain, the hole. And at the same time, it seems to me that your mother's passing was the impetus to go live the life that was torn from her.
Yes. I really believe that. And I've thought about that for a long, long time. My mother was 38 when she died, so she was very young. And I'm convinced that she passed something on to me. Yeah. But I felt a responsibility even at that age because suddenly I was on my own, in my own place, 15 years old. And I thought, I've got to make something of myself, you know, I've got to do something. But she passed things on to me. I think, you know, all my early songs, and even now, they're very emotional. And I think because of that, because I lost her so young and so early, I went into that world, that emotional, sensitive world. And all my songs were wrapped around those kind of things. And you know, I didn't sit down, or I never sit down and try to write an emotional ballad or anything. I never sit down to try and write anything. It's just there. And it starts, it's weird. It's when I write a song, or I know I'm going to write something, I just let it happen. And I don't think about it. I don't think about the lyrics or anything. They just arrive. So I've always thanked my mother for that, because you're right. I could have gone down the dark side, and I could have got into some weird things. You know, I could have been a vagrant. I could have been stealing cars or something, but I wasn't. I went down the other path, and I tried to make the most of the time I'd been given, that opportunity, you know.
Mm. Yeah, you know, it's interesting too, when you talk about the love songs, or you talk about the dramatic and the epic things you were creating. Something that I've noticed is you've held strong to the very thing that you started with, meaning you were shaped young, and then, you know, you met Russell, and obviously you're writing these pieces of material together, and then you have these beautiful love songs that clearly speak to the masses, because they recognize the pain in you. They didn't know it was pain in you, but the subconscious understanding of where you've been is really profound. And I think that kind of energy comes off of people. People feel it, and they say, oh, this is sincere, right? And what's interesting, Graham, is you have taken something that is in some ways, and this is not meant to be disrespectful to you, typical, and you've made it your own, and you've made it your own genre. You've literally created a love song genre. And I get it, you do a lot of other things, but let's face it, you're known for love songs. And you know, it's almost like a subgenre that this is, what kind of music do you play? Oh, we play air supply music.
Yeah, that's true. And we did, well, that genre has been created. We had a lot to do with it. If in fact, we didn't create the whole thing. But you're right. If people think of love songs, air supply's right there.
Yeah.
But you're right. People do, I hope, think that the songs are sincere, and the songs may not be for everyone, you know, but they are sincere and they're very real. And so that's why over the years, you know, people have said, oh, here's another love song, you know, from Air Supply, which is up the chart, going up the charts. And we used to think about that, Russell and I, and go, yeah, but that's who we are, you know. It's not like we're trying to be somebody else. This is who we are. We never sat down or tried to make a design for our career. We didn't see this happening. We just took the path that was in front of us. And here we are 46 years later, and the songs are still as enticing and are still as powerful as they always were. And because we won't change, because this is what we love to do. And consequently, when people come to see us live, they do feel that, you know. I mean, I see from the stage people, and there's a lot of guys too, they got tears running down their face, not because of the songs, but they're relating the songs to their experience, and they're thinking, oh my God, yeah, I understand that, you know, my mother or my sister or my love, my wife, my girlfriend, they relate to it, and that's a beautiful thing, you know. And sometimes, you know, I start tearing up when I'm singing something sometimes, you know, on stage, and it's a bizarre thing, but it's a beautiful thing at the same time. And as I said, it's not for everyone, you know. Air Supply's music isn't for everyone, but for the people that do enjoy it, it's real and it's engaging, you know.
Yeah. You know, if I may share a little story, about my experience with your material is this: I don't ever remember lyrics. I don't ever. And, you know, I think it's because I'm a percussionist and I'm listening to, you know, the rhythms and the arrangement, the melodic structure. Those are all really important to me. But I rarely remember the lyrics of songs. And yet, it's possibly just a product of my youth and the romanticism of you know, your material connecting to a part of my life, like you mentioned a second ago, where, you know, the world, for example, I was 14 when your first album hit big in the States.
Right.
And that's that prime period of youth where you're, you know, you're sort of past the early ugly stages of puberty and you're into those first puppy love moments. But your parents are typically alive. You probably are going to a school where your lifelong friends are created. And my memories of your music intertwining with that period of my life is stark. It's very, very powerful. It's very, it's like going to Japan and smelling the soy sauce in the air. It connects you.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And the reason I share this is because I remember your lyrics.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't help it. It's a gift. And I guess I just wanted to share with you that, you know, when I hear "Here I am," you know, my brain goes, "Oh my God!" It's just like, it's so lovely, and I tear up, and I have not been blessed to see you live. I do hope to see that next time you come out. But when I'm driving by myself in the car, I'll start crying. Absolutely start crying. Touches me to the gut.
Yeah, well, that's a great story. Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's funny when I get into a new song, and I know it's coming, and it's such a beautiful moment that I treasure so much, because I feel it. It's like this wave coming, and then suddenly I'm in the wave and it's moving me around, and then I start crying too. And it's a weird thing. And sometimes, often, I just have to stop, and I've got tears and everything, and I stop, and then I say to myself, okay, let's do it, you know, and then all the song just unfolds, and it's such a beautiful moment. But I feel so fortunate to be able to experience that and to be able to do what I love to do and earn a living at it. You know, a day doesn't go by where I'm not thankful for having that life, because I just love it so much. And here we are all these years later, and we're still doing our thing, you know.
And we're talking.
And we're talking, yeah. It's quite amazing, you know.
It is. I wish I had that gene. It's an extraordinary gift you have. I do want to ask one more question about your mother, if I may.
By all means, yeah.
When you look at your discography, is there any one song that you never considered at the time, but you look back and you realize, oh my goodness, I wrote this about my mom?
Yeah, there is one song, and it's called Mother Said.
Oh, okay.
It's on one of our albums. I can't remember which one, but it's probably the most personal song I've ever written, and certainly about my mother. But it was about the whole time right before she died, you know, and I tried to encapsulate it in a song very quickly. And it's a really short song. But I remember when my mother was ill, she was coughing a lot, you know, and I thought, oh, she's got a cough. And she was in bed, and I used to go in and see her at night. And I'd read to her, because I was an avid reader. I loved Charles Dickens, you know. And I used to read her some Dickens most nights. And I went in the night before she died, and I said, oh, okay, what do you want to read tonight? And I said, well, I want to read you some Little Dorrit. And she says, no, I'm tired tonight. Let's do it another time. And that was the last time I saw her. Oh. So I wrote this song about that, she said she was tired, so I left. And then in the morning, she had gone. But that's the most personal song I've written about her, you know, or the most personal song I've ever written, I think. Yeah. But, you know, it's funny because we've just started to play it live again, and it has quite an effect on people, you know, which is what I want.
Yeah, those immensely personal songs are quite difficult to perform. I'm not trying to weave myself into your story, but I certainly recognize that. I was asked one year to sing "O Holy Night" at Christmas, and I couldn't make it through it. I just bawled the whole time, and I did it in front of 500 people. And afterwards, everybody came up to me and said, "You didn't sing a word, but it was beautiful."
Yeah, it's not a great thing though. It's just so beautiful, you know.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness, that just kind of took me into an emotional place there. I'm sorry. This is the 45th year of your band. Well, 46 years you had just mentioned.
Yeah.
What do you attribute to your longevity? How do you think you made it this far?
I think from what we touched on a few minutes ago, that it's really genuine, you know, and we're not trying to be something that we're not. Right. We're not trying to be in a rock and roll band and be in a successful rock and roll band. We're in this band, and it is what it is. The success, I think, came about for several reasons. One of the reasons is we magically hooked up with Clive Davis in our early career when we first came to the US. Plus, Russell and I have different roles in the band. We're not competing. For instance, in the Eagles, when the original members there, every one of them was a great songwriter. Mm-hmm. But in Air Supply, it's just me. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love my role, and I try to do it as best I can. And it takes a lot of work to figure out when is the right time to bring a new song in. But Russell, you know, he's the lead singer. And so I look at it as my job to bring him the best songs I can bring so he can perform at his best, you know. Yeah. But we never compete. Plus, we're great friends. We never had an argument in all this time, simply because we have different roles. And, you know, I live here, I live in Utah, as we said. Russell lives in California, and I never see him when we're not working. I don't see him, you know. So when we do get together, there's a lot to talk about and a lot to discuss, you know. But, you know, we don't even make a lot of plans for the band. We don't say, okay, in 6 months, we want to go and play at the pyramids in Egypt or anything like that. We just, you know, life happens, and the band is a part of my life and a part of Russell's life, and we just live it the best we can, you know.
Yeah. When you met Russell and you heard that voice, was there a moment, I can imagine, that you were on the side of the stage perhaps, and Russell steps out and he starts singing his part, and you say, "Oh my goodness, listen to that tenor," because the note that comes out of his voice, it's the timbre, you know, it's that round tone. It's so long and straight, and it's right on the money. It doesn't waver. What was your first experience? Because I think it's pretty much a perfect tenor.
Oh, it is, yeah. Well, Russell and I, when we met, well, in Superstar, the whole company sat down for the first time, 35 people, and we were in front of the musical director who we just met, and he said, okay, and I didn't know the songs from Superstar. I should have got the album and learned everything, but I didn't. But I knew Jesus Christ, Superstar, right. Come on. And he said, okay, we're going to sing that chorus. That's the one I knew. And then suddenly 35 people sang, and I'd never heard anything like it. And the hairs on the back of my neck just stood up, and I went, whoa. But next to me, sitting right next to me, was this guy with this big afro, and his voice cut through like a knife. And I remember going, wow, what a great voice. And, you know, I've never thought I have a great voice. I have a decent voice.
You have a beautiful voice.
I'm not a lead singer at all. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. And after we'd finished that rehearsal, I turned to him and I said, wow, you've got a great voice. And he said, oh, thanks, you know. And I introduced myself and I said, oh, I'm Graham Russell. And he said, oh, I've got the same name. He said, I'm Russell Hitchcock. I said, oh, wow. So we had something in common, but we were the only two people in the whole company that didn't know anybody else. All the other people had been in other shows, so they had friends. We didn't. And so we gravitated towards each other and we became friends on the first day. Then I found out that he was born in June. I said, well, I am too. And he loved the Beatles, and he saw the Beatles when he was 14 in Australia. I saw them when I was 14 in Nottingham, where I come from. And we went, oh, no way. And so we had this thing. So almost straight away, we had this great friendship on the first day. And it just went from there. And, you know, they allot you a space in the boys' chorus room to do your thing or get ready for the show. And they put him right next to me without knowing anything. And we just became friends. And then we started to create this little band, not a band, it was just the two of us. And because I had my guitar in the dressing room all the time, and that's be playing songs. And he'd say, oh, what's that? I haven't heard that before. I said, no, I wrote this song, you know, and he'd join in, and that's how we started. And then the other cast members would come by the dressing room and they would just drop in to hear us singing, because we had this thing when we would sing a two-part, it was just magical. And we knew it from the very beginning. It was just beautiful. And people would say, wow, you guys sound great. And that's how it began, you know, and it never deviated from that. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Not to compare you to ABBA, because of course it's not the same kind of thing, but you do have the ability to harmonize and sing in unison. And there isn't that weird chorusing effect that happens. Your voices do mix really well.
They do. But you're right, Russell's got this soaring tenor, and my voice is a low baritone, and it's very kind of, I have a thick, rich voice down the bottom, but his cuts like a knife. But together they're amazing. But I'm actually a big ABBA fan too, simply because I love songs, you know, and growing up with the Beatles, and I love all that. It's great.
Yeah, you know, you've lasted so long. Here you are in your 46th year. You know, you don't need a time machine to see how your impact has changed, you know, the musical landscape. You just never went away. And I love that. And I was thinking that it's perhaps due to the style of the music you play, and maybe not, I don't know, but it doesn't seem to have a timestamp on it. You know, it doesn't feel like disco did. And I've never been negative on disco. I love the 70s disco. I love the 70s funk. I love 80s synth pop. I love it all. But what are your thoughts on the fact that somehow your music has escaped categorization?
That's very true. We have escaped that. And you're right, like disco is from the 70s. You know, the synth pop is the 80s, although we began in the 80s in the US, certainly. But I think because our songs get played so often now over this, you know, for almost 5 decades, you can still hear a lot of our music on the radio. You know, we're in movies, we're on sitcoms, we're on The Simpsons, we're on The Family Guy. So we've become current with all the current cultural things that are going on in our lives. And I think that's brought us through. Like you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, you know, some people may just be getting into us now, into our music now, and they may be in their 20s or teenagers, and we see them at the shows. And so for them, it's beginning. So we've gone through all these years, and we don't feel dated, you know. I mean, but then that may be a little the wrong thing to say, because I mean, we're getting older, certainly, but you know, at our shows we get all different people, like young kids and some 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and sometimes we do meet and greets, as every band does, and I say to them, what are you doing here? How did you come here? And they're all shaking, they're so nervous, and they say, oh, we heard you in this movie or that movie, we heard All Out of Love on Deadpool or something, or we saw you in, we saw Brad Pitt in the car on Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And I go, oh, right, yeah. So for them, it's just beginning, you know, but for us, we've been there a long time, but it's such a wonderful thing.
You know, you mentioned new generations, and I have loved since the beginning. I have 6 children, so I've been I've been a busy man.
Yeah.
But they're a generation apart, meaning I have a 31-year-old son down to 7-year-old twins, and I love introducing them to all different styles of music. And I've played, you know, the ABBAs and the Air Supplies many times for them. And I wonder if you and Russell have ever considered that you're responsible for half the children conceived during the 70s and the 80s. Has this ever been a joke? You know, because I imagine that there has to, I don't know, there's no question here. I imagine there has to be some sort of like realization that you are the lovemaking capital of the world in your songwriting.
Oh, I agree with you. And we do think about that sometimes. I mean, I'm sure after people come to see us live or they listen on the radio, they get in that zone, you know, and they certainly, you know, people write to us and they ask if we could be there at the birth of their child, you know. And once we were somewhere and it was backstage, and a lady and her husband, she was going to give birth in the next few days, and she asked if Russell would put his hand on her stomach and kind of bless the child inside, which was pretty heavy, you know, and which he did. Yeah. And he said, of course. And she was like, she began crying. She was so full of joy at that. And later on, she contacted us and she said, when my baby was born, she had the Air Supply video running in the room, like the Hawaii video. She wanted that to be the first thing her child was exposed to. I thought, wow, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, heavy but lovely, and obviously an honor.
It's a great honor, you know. It's funny because when we do meet people after the shows, it's always an honor to meet people because, you know, people spend their money and they spend their time to come and see us. And I always feel such great gratitude that they're there and I'm allowed to meet with them. And the music has brought us together, even if it's only for a few minutes. It's such a great thing, the power of music itself, to bring people like that together and to give people something that they may not understand on their own. You know, even if they hear a song and then they go, oh, wow, I remember that. Or I remember what I was doing. That's a very powerful thing to happen. Yeah.
What's your feelings on, you know, 46 years in the business, what's your feelings on celebrity? Because I imagine it has to be sometimes quite joyous. It's kind of nice to know that people recognize you, or they know, you know, once they find out who you are, for example, then they say, oh my gosh, you know, and they start telling you their stories. But I imagine there's times where it's immensely overwhelming or maybe even frustrating, and you just kind of want to be left alone. Do you have not trying to make you uncomfortable in any way, but do you have a story about, you know, your dealing in celebrity, some sort of maybe unknown touring story or something that, you know, you can share your relation to that?
Well, that celebrity was very intense in the 80s, you know, and especially if Russell and I were together. But that was several decades ago now. Mm-hmm. And now it doesn't happen at all, because I think the world's moved on from that a little bit. Okay. Because, you know, especially like if you're in New York, for instance, and you see somebody like a celebrity, nobody cares anymore, I don't think. Well, that's my feeling. But, you know, where I live in the mountains, you know, and everybody knows me around here, even though I'm quite remote. And but I never really think about it now, because, you know, some people they come up to me, they still do, and they say to me, because I'm 6'5", I'm really tall.
Yeah, you stand out.
Yeah, I'm kind of an imposing being, you know, and I got this big boomy voice, and people come up to me and they say, "You're somebody, aren't you?" And I say, yeah, I'm actually me, you know. And they don't know who I am, but they know I'm connected to something. So it's quite funny. And they say, are you him? And I say,
him.
yeah, I've been him for a long time, you know. And then I just walk away. But I never think about that because it doesn't really happen that often, you know.
Yeah. Do you have a little bit more time for a few more questions? Is that okay?
Certainly, yeah.
One thing I want to ask somebody like you, who's an impeccable songwriter.
Oh, you're very kind.
Well, it's true. Let's face it. I mean, I want to honor that. But when did you realize you wrote a song that absolutely didn't work? You know, I mean, can you talk about a songwriting failure or something experiential around that, something you've brought to Russell and your production team, and they said, this is awful, and you owned it. You were in love with it, and it was just taken away from you.
Right. Well, that's never happened to me, funnily enough, because you know, when I'm writing a song, if I begin and I think it's not what I want it to be, or it's not that it's not good enough, but it's not the right song for the moment, I don't finish it and I'll leave it alone and I go on to something else. So if I do finish a song, it's because I'm really into it. But I'm in the fortunate position of being able to make my own judgment now. You know, I mean, I decide when we go in the studio and what we're doing. So I'm very cautious about that. I won't go into the studio until I'm totally prepared. And I demo all my songs fully before I even bring them to Russell. You know, I'll have a full band on it. I have sometimes strings and orchestra if I really believe in the song. Because when I bring it to Russell, I want him to hear how it's going to sound, you know. Yeah. But Russell always loves all my songs, which I'm very fortunate. Yeah. But he's never said to me, oh, I don't like that. Because I wouldn't bring him something that I know he wouldn't like. Right. Because we know each other so well, and I know exactly what he likes. And if there's a song that's arrived, as I call it, I'll demo it and I'll bring it to him and I'll say, have a listen to this. And he'll say, oh God, I love it. And then we'll decide if it's coming in the show, and then we go from there, you know.
Yeah, you know, you allude to the Beatles, and, you know, in that 6.5-year period, I believe they wrote between it, well, honestly, the two of them, but sometimes the three or four, they wrote, I believe, 654 songs, something like this. And when you look back at your career, was there a point where things were pouring out of you that you, in a sense, you had already written the next album?
Yeah, I always like to stay an album in front. I've always done that simply for that reason. I don't want to run out of ideas. So I'm always making sure I've got a lot of songs for the next record. Of course, now not many people make CDs anymore. It's a different industry now, totally. People release single songs and stuff. But in those days, I used to be an album in front. And what we used to do, we'd be on the road for 9 months in a typical year in the 80s. And then we'd go back to Australia. We'd make an album around Christmas time, because that's the summer there. We'd spend a month making an album. And then we'd do the videos. And then we'd go back out on the road again. So that was our life for maybe 8 or 9 years. And we never really got to enjoy a lot of it because we were inside of it. And so I was always writing for the next album. And in fact, when we would record, we recorded in Sydney, our early albums, the producer, Harry Maslin, would say to me, oh, you know, the album sounds great, when it was almost finished. And he'd say, are we going to make another one next year? And I say, yeah, I've written most of the songs for it. I didn't go, oh, okay, that's great. So I would always have to be in front. I didn't want us to be the band that you spends all their life writing one album, like maybe 20 years, and then they have 6 months to write the next one. Right. And because that's the road to failure. Yeah. So you know, I've always thought I need to be prepared at all times, you know, and I still am now. I'm always working on. I always have at least a dozen songs that I'm working on, you know, all the time.
Yeah. You released Astral Love last year.
Yeah.
How was that received? I mean, again, because the record industry has obviously changed in cosmic ways,
Yeah.
right? It's all sort of self-production, and it's almost like you put a thing together and you put it on Amazon, and that's about as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
How was it received?
It was received really well.
Good.
A lot of people bought it, but not like they used to, of course.
Sure.
You're right, it's so different now. But that song in particular, which I loved, I thought, yeah, let's put it out. And in fact, now we released a couple of songs just a few weeks ago, and we just put them out there. People don't need to buy them anymore. We just put them there because I want people to hear the new things, and then I want them to come to the show to hear it live. So yeah, everything we put out gets really well received. I don't know if the whole world is listening to it anymore, to the new things, but we have a very large audience out there, a social audience that's 2 or 3 million or something.
Airheads.
The airheads, yeah, and they all love what we do.
Yeah.
If we get new people, that's a bonus for us. But it's funny now. Not making albums anymore. It's a different time, but I think we've adjusted to it really nicely.
May I ask the moniker Lord Graham Russell?
Oh well, that's an English title, and I own a little piece of property in England that had a title with it, and I thought, yeah, that's kind of nice, But in America, it doesn't really mean anything.
No.
So, and I have an American passport now, but they don't recognize titles or anything like that in the Republic, in this Republic. So, but it's a fun thing and it's very real. But I never even think about it anymore, actually.
Yeah, no, I actually knew about it. I just wanted to hear your story. I was hoping you could talk about maybe meeting Queen Elizabeth or something.
Oh, I haven't met her, actually. I had lunch with Prince Charles and Lady Diana in 1988.
Oh my God.
That was the closest I came to that, and that was at the bicentennial for Australia, and I had lunch with them, and that was a trippy thing. It's funny because I think at that point they were probably the most famous couple in the world, Prince Charles and Lady Diana.
Yeah.
And sitting right there with them at the table is so strange. I mean, you didn't move because or pick a spoon up. It might not be the right thing to do, and you got to pick your knife and fork up in the correct order. But after about 10 or 15 minutes, everybody gets loose, and everybody had a glass of wine, and then you become kind of very social with them, and you realize that people like that are just like you. They're just people,
Right. Yeah, no, I bring this up often, but Eddie Vedder, the singer from Pearl Jam, used to, I don't know if he lives in Seattle anymore. I haven't seen him in a long time, but years ago, he said to me that the only difference between him and me was that what he does is he does it on television. And so there's this sort of sense of you're more important because, more people have seen you. And even though that might make more monetary sense, you know what I mean, as far as the impact of your finances and whatnot, people hearing and seeing your art. The reality is we all, use the toilet and have needs and sweat and, but I do imagine that's a bit challenging because even though I'm used to doing these interviews, I was very excited to chat with you today. And for about 10 seconds right before you popped on, my heart started fluttering. I thought I get to talk to Graham Russell, and this is wonderful. But being in front of Lady Di would have terrified me.
It was terrifying at first until we were at the table and she turned to me. I don't know, I can't remember why Russell wasn't there because it was in Sydney. But she turned to me and she said, I've got one of your albums. And I was like, whoa, I thought that what a great compliment, and I asked her which one it was. I can't remember now, but she said, yeah, I know, I'm a fan. And I went, oh, wow. It's so, it's incredible. And when she unfortunately left us, I was devastated because I felt that I knew her, which I didn't, of course. We had that lunch, but I felt like I knew her, but because she had that effect on me, and I'm sure on everyone, you know. But yeah, that was pretty trippy, talking to them and talking to Prince Charles, you know, who speaks very posh and very funny, you know, very funny.
Yeah. Yeah. With the COVID kind of shutting the world down, what has that done for Air Supply? I mean, you'd mentioned before that, you know, you and Russell just kind of decide, oh, I think we're going to go do this thing. But what's, you know, what are the next plans once everything settles down a bit? Will we see you back on the road? Are you going to maybe release some new material since you're always an album ahead?
Yeah. We do a lot of shows, you know, and we already have shows booked in May from then on out. You know, we've done over 5,200 live shows in our career. So we love being out on the road simply because we love that energy that the crowd gives to us, and it's a reciprocal energy, you know. But we will be going out on the road because we love it so much. But until that day, you know, I mean, I write every day. You know, I'm writing my 6th musical now, which I just finished. So that keeps me going, you know, because writing every day, I need something to write for. And, you know, we don't make that many albums anymore, although I'm beginning to think that we should make another one now. So hopefully that'll come to fruition, you know.
No, that's wonderful. Well, to close, if I may ask this, because you are a legend, I know that embarrasses you, but you are in this business. How would you encourage upcoming artists, especially with the change of the music business and the climate, the way music is released, you know, but it doesn't change how music is written.
No.
You know, what would you tell an upcoming burgeoning artist? You know, what are your first few steps? You know, because it seems like a management or marketing company still applies.
It does. You know, I would give the same advice I would have given 40 odd years ago, and that is to always, and this is not anything new, I'm quoting Joseph Campbell here, you know, follow your bliss and live in the moment. And if you are a budding songwriter, keep at it and write that great song. And it may take a while, but just keep at it and don't quit, don't give up on anything. Because, you know, many are called but few are chosen. Don't be one of those people that are called and nobody hears about you. I mean, there are so many artists and so much music, especially on the internet now, that it's like a sea. But you've got to keep going and create something that the world needs and the world will love, you know. And you can only do that if you keep at it. Just keep going. And, you know, I'm a great believer that if you move forward and you follow your bliss, that the universe takes a couple of steps for you. You take a couple of steps, then something will happen. Yes. Somebody will call you and say, oh, would you like to come and play at this little function? You know, where I live in a mountain community, but I don't have any neighbors. I'm very fortunate. But they asked me last February, one of my neighbors, an elderly lady, she said, you know, she cornered me when I was at the feed store buying some grain. And she said, oh, you're that movie star, aren't you? And I said, no, I'm not a movie star, but I'm a musician. She said, oh, right. She said, would you come and play at the old age pensioners luncheon in my little town, you know? And I thought, she said, there's going to be about 60 people there, but they're all in their 80s. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to come and play them for that. And I went, and it was the most fabulous time, you know, and they were all eating their delivered meals. And I'm sure they didn't know who I was, but I was like the minstrel. I just played and wandering between all the tables, and they loved it. But my point there being, you know, if I hadn't followed my dream and never quit, I wouldn't be able to do that, you know. So now I can go and play for an old age pensioners luncheon and have such a great time. But people have got to, if you're a budding songwriter, don't stop, just keep at it, you know, and it will come to you for sure.
You know, I want to end on a quote from your website. It says, "And to the delight of music listeners everywhere, the story continues."
Oh, that's right. That's great. Yeah, that's very cool.
Thank you so much, Graham. This has been an absolute joy. I am beyond honored. And even though I haven't had a chance to play drums with you, my mom will be very happy that I spoke to you. So we're good.
Oh, well, give her my best. And thank you so much, Robbie. I've really enjoyed this. It's been a very frank and inside edition of part of Air Supply's story. So thank you so much for your time, too. It's been great.
Thank you. I'm honored, sir. Take care of yourself. Be blessed. And hopefully I'll see you on the road someday.
I hope so. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I need you to stay.